Hello and welcome to Bad Marriages in the Bible.
Hey everyone, welcome back.
I'm Kate.
I'm Sean.
And you have found Dandelion Ministries, where we share the grace of Jesus Christ in your place of need or pain or your bad marriage.
Yeah.
Which we are not singling anybody out, but the Bible itself is quite frank and honest about the relationship struggles that the married people have in there. They are constantly telling stories on themselves. Remember, this was all oral tradition. So they were like gathering around the campfire way back in Genesis time. They were like, let me tell you another thing. And that's how all of these stories got passed along. So they could have omitted some of the more, scandalous aspects or airbrush themselves to make themselves look good. But they had been so met by God's promises and by his forgiveness that they were boasting in their weakness.
Yeah.
Because it showed God's big redemption.
That's right. It's like HBO. It's not like, network television. They told you the dirty, the down and dirty, and because they wanted to point to God and his redemptive power. How the Lord is stronger and that he only works with broken people. As one of our mentors used to say, this guy named John Stanley, who's down in Australia. John, if you're listening, love you, miss you. He used to say, get two or more people together and expect conflict. And so the marriage has that built into it. There's two people involved.
Woo!
And then obviously we've talked a lot about the polygamist moments in scripture. And so that made the conflict even worse. But
more than two people.
More than two.
Get lots of people in there.
But, just having two people together, two broken people, two people that are desperate for love, because we all are, and that need it and want to be able to give it, and yet still find themselves always messing that up.
Falling short of
Falling
that.
into conflicts. I just love you so much. I don't know why I get so angry at you. That kind of thing.
Sean and I never deal with that.
Never. And so that is why we decided to look at the marriages, because they really highlight it for us. And scripture is just chock full of it.
So we've been actually in the book of Proverbs, which is really a collection of short, poetic, wise sayings. Often
Proverbs,
written.
one might say.
Yes.
That's where we get the word.
One sentence often written in couplets, where the second line enhances or takes further the thought of the first line. There is sort of an overall structure, though, that we have painted. And that is that, the authorship is attributed to Solomon. But it also was his school, the people who were his sages while he was alive and also in generations after him that carried on his wisdom sayings. So all into, Hezekiah's reign as well. And he's mentioned. So it could be just a school of thought that agreed with what Solomon was teaching. And the last two chapters, which is where we're headed, are written by two different sages. One is King Lemuel and one is Agur.
Right. They actually, it says it in the book, so we can say that with confidence.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. They name themselves.
Yes.
And it has an overarching theme of a father giving his son his advice and imploring him over and over again. My son, listen to my voice. Listen to me. Listen to your mother. We're trying to warn you of the ways that will seek to entrap you and steal your soul and your wealth and your sanity. So we want to warn you of these things, and we want to, give you a vision for how to live wisely and sensibly in this life. Most of the time, if you are not lazy and not a glutton, you will also prosper. So those are helpful, practical ways. Proverbs is not talking about, there's one commentary, Proverbs seldom takes you to church. It happens in the marketplace, in the business place, in the home. So we're talking about the practical ways that you experience your own brokenness and the need for an intervention of love and of, God's wisdom to break in.
Yeah.
And
It's good counsel. Yeah. I mean, it's like, this is how to function in the world well.
yes,
And that's a lot of what Proverbs is about. It does obviously get into heart issues, but
it does.
it majors on the other.
And there is an overarching contrast between wisdom and folly throughout the book. And so they he roots wisdom in the fear of the Lord. That is where
the beginning of wisdom, yeah.
Beginning of wisdom is in the fear of the Lord. So if you don't have that kind of fear, then whatever knowledge you have won't have that depth of wisdom to it.
It's going to fall flat a bit.
That goes
Your
with
perspective
this
is
humility.
Be a little flawed.
yes. You won't have the humility. You will think you are your own God versus there is a God and I'm not him.
You're right. And you will just frankly have the values of all existence confused on some level, right?
Yes.
Like that you won't actually be concerned about life past this life, it'll be, this is all that there is ism, as they say. And your values will be dictated by probably your own survival or the survival of your kind of legacy, your children and stuff like that. It won't really be about any kind of eternity or really actually when you lose the framework of a worldview with God and all of that, you start to stand on quicksand when it comes to any kind of moral or standard or truth, which is where our culture is today.
So it's it's trying to win you. It's trying to win you to how wise it is to believe in a God, and specifically a God who reveals himself. And actually, the first 9 chapters are more of a narrative between wisdom and folly. And wisdom takes on this persona that they call the woman of wisdom and the woman of folly, that actually breaks into our mind and creates something that wasn't there before. And it rejects, all of our efforts to figure things out on our own. But it breaks in order to create that kind of humility and that kind of faith that there is a God who is guiding you and who is for you and who wants your best. So that's what wisdom ultimately breaks in. And we traced it to the answer in the New Testament, where it's a bit folly to our normal thought process that we would need an answer or a wisdom from outside of our own best thinking. But this folly to our normal logic is actually the wisdom of God and the power of the good news of the cross, that God has actually broken into our lives with a word of forgiveness, with the blood of his own son who gave his life for us and has forgiven us in our places of folly so that we would be brought back into his wisdom and brought back into his love and into his family. So there's this picture of a very active wisdom who is calling out to us, invading lives in order to bring them back home to God.
That's right. And it's a good review. And you might have noticed that we tend to review a lot. And it's because we always forget. The reality is we forget all the time. And when we start our episodes, we really like to bring you back to the truth, back to that grounding, that this is what we're talking about. We're talking about a God who's coming after you and a God who is for you and a God who is speaking to you. All of the word of the scriptures are doing something to you. It's not passive and not neutral. And so that's why we love to review, because we all wake up and forget what we knew yesterday on some level, and life keeps hitting us in ways that we get overwhelmed with, and we need to hear good news again. And so here we are. back in Proverbs, and we're coming towards the end of it. And we spent the last episode really just walking through kind of a, point by point, just kind of tackling some of the statements that had to do with relationships in Proverbs. And we missed a couple. We ran out of time, so we stopped. And there's just a couple left, which have to do with living with a quarrelsome spouse. It's usually a woman, because again, this is a father talking to a son. So contextually, it's usually a woman here. And this, in verse 19 of chapter 21, it's better to live in a desert land than with a quarrelsome and fretful woman. And then this, it goes on and talks about a foolish man too. So it's not just the women that are crazy. But in chapter 23, verses 26 through 28, it's one I wanted to highlight before we jump in to chapter 30. And that was just, again, talking about the prostitute and the adulteress. And again, this is a father talking to a son. If you're just thinking about your child, everything that Kate said is exactly right about, the bigger narrative of God and us. And the very immediate narrative is just, you want your child to do the best they can in life. You want them to succeed. You want them to not suffer and to not have pain. So we do the best we can with our kids. And we often use a lot of law. We employ the law as parents. We have to restrain sin. That's what the law does at its best. When it comes to dealing with, advice like this, it's just to stop us from being as bad as we possibly could be. But ultimately, as Kate said, it convicts us and drives us to the cross. But we see the father say, "My son, give me your heart." In chapter 23, verses 26 through 28, give me your heart. It's how he opens. It's really important because it goes then on to talking about the prostitute. The prostitute is a deep pit. An adulteress is a narrow well. She lies in wait like a robber and increases the traitors among mankind. And it's very easy to just blame. I mean, we talked about this before. It's very easy to blame a woman who's, scantily dressed or whatever and is out there kind of tempting you, the temptress. And that kind of, at a very surface level, makes sense. But the reality is, prostitution isn't the oldest profession on earth because they're, just because women are out there trying to do it. It's because there are customers. There are men who want it. And that's what this father is saying. My son, give me your heart and let your eyes observe my ways. So he is appealing to the heart of the son, because that is actually where the desire lies, to go be with the prostitute. And where the one is you actually live is in your heart motivations. All your actions and everything like that, as we've said before in this podcast, stem from your heart's desires. And so all your willpower, everything like that, is all run by your heart. And the father knows that and is saying, give me your heart. And, your heart is going to want these things. And I'm telling you that they are death. And so I just wanted to highlight that, because that is an important thing. It's very easy to read the Proverbs sometimes and just be like, yeah, those darn women who are out there tempting me, if you're a guy, and it's very unfair, because it's actually your heart that wants all of that. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
No, that's important to show that the scripture is actually putting the responsibility on the man here.
Yes, it's a warning, but at the same time, is talking mostly about your heart. Yeah. Good. It does say, chapter 27, verses 15 through 16, do one more little hit towards a quarrelsome wife. So the wisdom of Proverbs is like, it really stinks to live with a spouse that just wants to fight all the time. And that's true. We've talked about that before. So we don't need to spend much more time on that. And basically saying, it's saying you can't change her. You can't change her or him. To restrain her is to restrain the wind, or to grasp oil in one's hand. And so this is something, just another proverbial nugget of wisdom for you out there. If you're in a relationship and you think, I'm getting into this relationship because I can change this person, take the word of Proverbs. You're not going to be able to control them. You're not going to be able to change them. That shouldn't be your goal when you get into a relationship, a meaningful relationship with somebody. It's going to end badly for you.
Absolutely. And you can reverse this too as a warning to daughters as they consider a future husband.
Yeah.
If there is a quarrelsome or violent streak
Oh, sure.
or controlling in any way, here is a verse that's warning you, you will not be able to change them. So don't enter into this. Um, the history of domestic violence would say that women have signed up for an abusive relationship
Mm.
all too often, that this is a warning against a quarrelsome wife, but really it's the quarrelsome men who have the long history of abusing their wives or their girlfriends
Mm-hmm.
or their daughters or their children. And so domestic violence sadly is still a very real issue. Um, and you know, it was on the rise in COVID. So this is definitely a warning for going into a relationship that you think you might change.
Mm.
Don't count on that.
Yeah, it's true. And it's something that it was just in the New York Times this past week of just the fact that there's a bit of a trend right now in film and in TV and stuff like that, where the very strong man, the strong-willed man, the kind of masculinity that's has a controlling edge to it,
Mm,
is kind of being celebrated again and being held up as like this is something you want.
mm,
And this is what we do all the time. We have this kind of flip-flopping nature to us where it's just like, no, it's toxic masculinity, all this stuff, and we're very down on it. And then we're like, but I actually really want that. I want somebody to kind of control me and to whatever. And it's just, like this is our brokenness.
yeah.
This is what we do with our love. And so that is a very good point, that the quarrelsome husband is frankly more dangerous, just in terms of safety. And so yeah, it's a good caution to all of us
Mm-hmm.
to actually, when you're thinking of being in a relationship with somebody like that, we talk about it with our daughters all the time. If they're worth being with, then they're going to respect you and love you and hold you up.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to be somebody that controls you or tries to, diminish you.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So you hear the parents trying to set that standard high for their son,
Yeah.
for what he's looking for in a wife, or you can use it for a daughter as well.
Yeah.
So
Good. Well, we've done all of the ones, the
shorter,
very obvious, shorter bits that have to do with relationships. So let's look at chapter 30.
It's meaty. Chapter 30, verses 18 through 23. And this is chapter 30 is written by Agur. And so his style of writing is a little bit different. And he loves to write in these collections of, I have 3 things to say, or 3 things are too wonderful for me, 4 I do not understand. And then he'll go into these lists and he'll repeat that format over and over again. 3 things are too wonderful, 4 I don't understand, or 3 things the earth under 3 things the earth trembles, under 4 it cannot bear up. So that is his rhythm in throughout chapter 30.
Mm-hmm.
And so the way I just love it as an English major. I'm like, ooh, we get to pull out the way it's written as well as what it's saying.
Yes, all you poetry gurus and kind of literary nerds, can get excited.
It's so fun.
Grammar
I love
is
it.
fun.
I do. I love it. Even in the title of chapter 30, there's a little footnote that says this was by Agur. And, 1 Kings chapter 4, verses 30 and 31 talks about the sages that were around Solomon. So you don't have to think too hard to think, oh, this is one of those guys probably. We don't know exactly who he is.
And Solomon is attributed, a lot of this book is attributed to him, as you said. And if I were him, he's a wise guy and he's got these other guys say, oh, that's a pretty good thought. Let's put that down. Let's add that to my book.
Right. And how humble of them to actually give them a little bit of notation.
One might call them wise.
A little credit, versus saying, oh, I said that. Right.
Right.
And so then even in the title verse of verse 1, the words of Agur, son of Jekah, the oracle. And in the footnote, um, it says the man declares to Ithael or to Ithael and Ukai. And so that little footnote that are in many of the translations actually means to someone who is in a state of woe. Like, so
Okay.
they are, they are, it's, the, I have wearied myself, oh God, I have wearied myself. Oh God, I have come to my end. So not all translators are in agreement to that, but that is just one little sign of how rich the Hebrew is, that they are even the sound that oracle or the footnote about it is reinforcing what this whole proverb is about, of how worried and wearied he is, and he's coming to God with his big problems and his big troubles. I would say the thing that Agur hates the most is arrogance. And so he is uncovering that throughout these proverbs and bringing that lament to God. So 30 verses 18 and 19, he says, 3 things are too wonderful to me, for I do not understand. The way of an eagle in the sky. That sounds very positive. Pretty.
I like when eagles fly.
I do.
It's very beautiful.
Calming. The way of a serpent on a rock.
How does that work? I mean, they don't have feet or hands.
I tell you what, yeah, they just like move along,
move up that rock.
It's crazy how they do that. It's like muscular control. So that would be awe-inspiring.
The slithering bit, yep.
With a hint of threat, I would say.
Okay, I'll give it to
you. Yes, the way of a ship on the high seas. So he's looking out, his palace that's nowhere near the sea, but in Jerusalem.
He probably had a summer home on the coast.
Yeah, perhaps.
If he's with Solomon, he probably lived well.
Yes. So we've visited the seas, and none of us can swim, so we're always scared of them. And we've seen the way a ship can survive those big waves.
It just goes right over them.
And it's a wonderful thing to behold. And every time I see that, I'm like, I'm so glad I'm not on that ship.
Yes, Kate she gets anxious in the rocking.
I don't like the rocking at all. But it is a thing to marvel, the way that they can just stay afloat. Again, I would say there is a hint of threat in all of these. Even the pleasant eagle in the sky means perhaps death for a mouse in the grass.
Sure, well, I'll say more about it in a sec. But you go ahead.
Okay, but so far it's been a marvelous thing, something that he has marveled at, and he's gotten still and calm and has noted something that's just right around him. Except for maybe the high seas thing. That was like a more special vacation. Otherwise, that is the beauty of art and of writing and of poetry, is it just gets you present and brings you into the moment, and you notice the things right around you. So thank you, Agur, for helping us to just notice those things. And then he's going to bring you into a real horrible thought.
Well, so 2 different things. One is, in addition to that, he says the way of a man with a virgin.
Oh, I missed that one.
You did miss that. And that is also not a bad thing per se.
No, yes.
And so the way, after doing a little reading on this, the first 4 things are things that are, like you said, threat, but at the very least, they're things that aren't easy to do. And so, like, you can't fly. Like, I can't walk out the door and take off like an eagle can. I can't slither up a rock as easily as a snake can. Like, these types of things. And the same thing with a ship on the high seas. Like, they're built for this. And so that's the way the commentators talk about it, is looking at these things and marveling at the easy mastery of these 4 things. And the man with the virgin is being more specific about actually literally a man, somebody who's older and more experienced in life, like a Solomon who has 700 women in his life. So Agur is very observant. He's like you, Solomon, with all of your women. You're excellent with the virgins. And so he's talking about the easy masteries, like that this is something that you are able to master, to enjoy, to do very easily. And so an inexperienced virgin, wouldn't know what they're doing. I mean, this is the joke we were talking about before this, is when we first got married, we were both virgins, and I was not a master in the bedroom. We didn't know what the hell we were doing, and that was fine. But that was like we learned together. It's going to take a few years for this to really be top notch, and it's one of the things they don't tell you, but that's true. And so that idea of just the easy mastery, so he's marveling at those things. And then he turns to a fifth one.
I just love just one more
Please,
thought about
ahead.
that. I love how non-pious this is. Like it's
it's very earthy.
Like a Casanova with a virgin. So this is not implying any kind of coercion or exploitation per se. Like the way it's phrased is he's able to pleasure her.
Yeah, she is like happy to have the experienced man with her, because it's just like he knows what to do. She doesn't know what to do. And it could go the other way too. It could be the cougar and the young man. So there we are.
Sure. Yes. And so, for all of the talk about chastity or,
Yeah, the Bible's not for prudes. It's just the way it is.
This is just saying this
God's
is the way it is.
What are you talking about? I know what I'm doing. I made you this way. I am not a prude.
It is an amazing thing because a woman is a complex thing.
That's
complex,
true.
Like high seas, or
Yes, it is as if I were trying to conquer the high
like
seas.
the stormy sky. And so for someone to know how to give her pleasure would be quite a thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is the sense of that verse.
That's right. And so then it turns all of a sudden. It goes from those things that are all positive things, like you said, with a little bit of intimidation perhaps in them, but him marveling at the fact that these 4 different persons or things are able to really operate in that zone really well. So he's happy about that. And then 20 changes, and it says, "This is the way of an adulteress. She eats and wipes her mouth and says, I have done no wrong." Like it's like a total left turn. What the heck? Not positive. But it is talking about kind of the ease with which she operates in her sin. And that's really what this is. He's marveling at that. Like these are really positive things. And then this negative thing of just like when she commits adultery, it's as if she's just eating. It like it's not a struggle for her. It doesn't conflict her at all for her to operate in her sin. I've done no wrong. And so he's just kind of, it's a false mastery of something. Yeah.
And he's also slipping in how easy sin comes to us.
Sure.
It is so easy to do something that has really violated somebody else and to cover it up so easily.
Well, yeah. I mean,
even the image of eating right after murdering somebody, or stealing their spouse, or lying or cheating or stealing or taking something that's not yours. Any of those things that are summarized by that word adultery, that it comes very easily for us to just compartmentalize and shut that off, that we even did that, and pretend like nothing's happened.
Right. And it does so much destruction so fast, like it's like you're saying, the ease of it too is just like, it just wreaks havoc, and so yeah.
So the Agur, by slipping that in, you're like, your mind has begun to soar to the heights and look upon the seas, and it's also very romantic in like the literary sense of that word. Like
Right.
You're beginning to think grand thoughts about the beauty around you. And then he just slides in a word of warning and of conviction.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy for us to do those things.
Yes, goes back to that, previous couple chapters ago with the heart that we talked about. That this is something that this is where we go naturally.
Yes.
Yeah. And then
So his rhyming continues. Let's
yeah,
keep
he
going.
shifts and he goes now to 3 things that the earth under which the earth trembles, under 4 it cannot bear up. So he does the same thing, 3 things and 4 things. And this one, they're different. This one he says a slave when he becomes king, and a fool when he's filled with food, and an unloved woman or a hated woman is another one, or an obstinate woman when she gets a husband, and a maidservant when she displaces her mistress. So at face value, like the unloved woman thing seems to stick out because that sounds like a good thing. An unloved woman who gets a husband.
It's really nice for her.
It's nice, yeah. But it's in the context of these other 4 things that are not great. When you think of a slave who becomes king, it's that also sounds like a nice thing, except for when you think of the kind of the vengefulness of our hearts. And we watched Gladiator 2 recently, and Denzel Washington is a...
It might spoil it for them.
Okay.
Well.
Tough. But Denzel Washington plays a guy who was once a gladiator, and he actually gains some power. And it doesn't go well.
It shows you what happens.
It shows you what happens when you didn't have power and you were ruled, and then you get the power to rule over somebody else.
And you're like, ooh, I'm going to...
It's vengeance. This is the world's language.
Yes.
It's not love and forgiveness.
It's not reconciliation.
It's vengeance.
It's revenge.
So that's the slave who becomes king. And then the fool when he's filled with food. What do you think that means?
Well, he doesn't have to beg and scrape and get on people's good side because he's hungry. He's been fed. So he is at his leisure to do his worst or whatever he wants to do. And he's
Just
a fool
continues
already.
in his foolishness. Yeah,
Yes.
he's not going to do anything.
There's nothing holding him back.
Yeah. And he's not having to work at all for anything now. He's like satisfied, so he can just continue in his laziness on one level, because Proverbs gets really specific about the laziness of the fool and all that earlier. Yeah, that's good. And so this unloved woman, when she gets a husband, there are other translations, and the King James translates it, I think, is it obstinate?
Odious.
And so it's showing that unloved is not strong enough. It's really a woman that is kind of terrible.
Already is hated.
Yeah, hated woman who's just the worst.
Who's, the way it paints it is someone who makes life miserable for those who love her.
Yeah, and when we were thinking about this, it's the evil stepmom of all Disney movies. I mean, it's Cinderella's stepmom, right? Like the movie just doesn't make any sense on that front. Like her mother died, and then the father remarried, and he remarried a horrible person.
How could you have stepped down like that?
The father was like super nice and great, and it's like he had terrible taste apparently outside of the Cinderella's real mom, and so he marries this evil stepmother, and she's evil.
Yeah,
and she treats Cinderella terribly. It's that kind of woman, and so the proverb is highlighting that a woman that is, or anybody, that it could be the man the same way, where you're a hated person, where you are actually just a deplorable person. And when you finally get into a relationship with somebody, you're just going to make their lives miserable too.
Yeah.
And it's a terrible thing. It's like, this is sad. It would have been better if that person didn't get into that relationship with that terrible person.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's a warning.
So it's a warning there. And then the maidservant, when she displaces her mistress. I don't know about you guys, but we cannot afford maidservants. So, so I don't know anybody out there who has one. But it used to be a thing. What did you read something about that? What does that help us understand?
Yes. So in a post-slavery world,
post Downton Abbey.
Yes,
it wasn't all slavery.
That's true. They had integrity in their work.
But
those lower class people.
Post-slavery for sure. It was slavery at this time, at this writing.
Yeah. Or even just a class system. But this would be, the nanny. The nanny who falls in love with the husband, the spouse. And he leaves his wife
for the male nanny. Just want to say
it could be, the pool man,
the pool man and the nanny. We'll just stay with those.
Or somebody you've met at work, who's caught your eye, and you've got no baggage with that person, and they make you feel so special.
Yeah, they're so into you, and I just haven't felt this way in years.
Right. And we
It's
don't
like,
have to,
because there's no complications.
right.
You don't know anything about them.
We don't have to deal with the bills together,
Yeah.
or, it's just all like googly eyes and romance, and we get to complain about the people close to us. And so that is the picture that's being painted here,
Right.
of the maidservant when she displaces her mistress, and there's going to be no kindness or compassion. It's like, well, you lost him, or you lost her.
Yeah. And it just destroys. It's what we said before. It's so easy how fast the sin just brings destruction. There's so much collateral damage in what this is saying. A maidservant, when she displaces her mistress, is that there's kids involved usually, there's families that get blown up, and it's just a disaster. And so under these things, the earth trembles.
Yes.
That's what he's saying.
The earth trembles and it cannot bear up. Abraham's family in Genesis, we did that several episodes ago, but
Yes.
This exact thing happened, and it was at the wife's request, Sarah's request, that
Hagar.
that Abraham help God's promise along for an heir by having a child with her maidservant. And he does, and then God was like, that's not what I intended. I wanted Sarah to have the baby, and sure enough, Sarah does have a baby in her super old age. But the two children, don't get along, and Hagar resents Sarah, and Sarah is very mean to Hagar. And so it's all a great sadness. It's a great sadness that happens, and God ends up taking care of Hagar, but she has to leave the family.
Yeah. And again, like I said many episodes ago, it's Hagar because of Sammy Hagar from Van Halen. But anyway, fair enough. But that is true. And so that verse 21 is it's kind of like when Paul in Romans 7 is talking about how he doesn't do the thing he wants to do. He keeps on doing the thing he doesn't want to do. And he says, who will save me from this body of death? Verse 21 here sounds like that. Under these things, the earth trembles. Under it, it cannot bear up. So like the earth has no answer.
Yes.
And we have no answer for these things. These are descriptive. I mean, it's a mirror to us in our hearts. And we all know someone, if not our own personal story, that has been described just in these past 4 verses, or 2 verses and four things. And so it's begging for an answer. It's crying out for someone to answer this. And so just as the law always does, it's pushing us towards Jesus. It's pushing us to God, who is the one who redeems and actually can bring new life out of the death that we cause, that can bear up underneath our sin, that he actually has an answer for it, and he actually conquers it, takes it to the grave, and then walks out of the grave. And so that's where Proverbs really pushes us in this, I think, in these few verses.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Amen.
You're welcome.
So Jesus is God's answer to this need and to your need today. Thank you for listening. We invite you to check out the show notes. You could reach out to us through the email there. Our website, dandelionministries.org, is also in there. We invite you to give, to support this show. Keep the lights on. Keep us podcasting.
Yeah.
And share this with your friends. And so we thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a great day.
Bye.